Hey listeners, it's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. The Hidden Gem is a new show hosted by Maya Demishkovich, CMO at Carroll Community College. This podcast is dedicated to empowering community college presidents, leaders, and marketing and communication professionals with the knowledge and insights that you need to harness the full potential of strategic marketing and communications within your institution. New episodes drop every other Monday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search for The Hidden Gem wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Breaking Silos, a podcast that shines a light on the incredible partnerships happening across campuses every day. I'm your host, Shane Baglini from Muhlenberg College. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing, enrollment management, student affairs, campus leadership, and more. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to Breaking Silos, where today my guests are joining me from beautiful Rochester, New York. We've got Brian Piper, the Director of Content Strategy and Assessment at the University of Rochester, and Megan Crawford, Senior Marketing Strategist in the Center for Advanced Research Technologies at the University of Rochester Medical Center. Brian and Megan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Shane.
It's nice to be here.
We are talking about AI at the University of Rochester, specifically how you all are using AI as a way to collaborate and break silos across campus. And so we're talking about the sort of university-wide AI council that you all have formed at Rochester. And Brian, I'll start with you for kind of a history of AI at Rochester. And tell us about why the AI Marcom group has formed, what the purpose is, members of that group, and sort of how this initiative at University of Rochester is helping you all collaborate.
So the university as a whole has been using AI and doing research with AI for years, and really we're kind of ahead of the game back in the 80s, really doing some progressive things in AI. But once generative AI came out in 2022, I started playing around with it a lot, ChatGPT initially, and Midjourney and DALL-E, and just kind of seeing what could be done. And pretty quickly realized that, there was a ton of opportunity within marketing, data analysis, personalizing content, those sorts of applications. So I didn't really see a whole lot. I'm in Central University Marketing Communications. I didn't see a lot of activity going around. I didn't see a lot of interest, but I knew there were pockets of interest. So I started reaching out to people. I've in Central Communications and Marketing, I've been involved in some other kind of silo breaking activities from, helping to socialize SEO around the institution. And then with the Google Analytics 4 migration, I got to reach out and connect with a lot of people across the institution. But those were very, pocketed groups of, either content creators interested in SEO or the analytics people. So I really saw that AI was going to be much more widespread than just these small pockets of people. And so one of the first people that I got connected with was Megan, and started talking with her about how they were using AI on her side of the fence. And being a very large institution, we have a lot of silos, and we have done work on and off with the medical center, but there's not a ton of communication or collaboration for the most part. So back in the end of February, I proposed to our leadership that we should start a Marcom AI committee, and reached out to people, kind of AI enthusiasts in different groups across the institution. So now we have about 20 members that make up this committee, from everywhere in HR to our business school to the medical center to our music school. So it's a wide range of people, not all in marketing, but all interested in AI. And then we also actually have a larger AI council that includes different domains like the clinical, the research, the academic, and then the administrative and Marcom. So now we're getting to see what all these different groups are doing and getting to learn from, their applications of the tools, even though, the final product might be different. The way they're leveraging the technology has so much crossover.
Yeah, and you did a nice job of kind of painting a picture of this university-wide effort with AI implementation, which to me is the only way to go about it as an institution. Not doing these things in vacuums and using AI to collaborate and work across campus. And which brings me to my question for you, Megan, is first of all, tell us about your role at University of Rochester Medical Center, and talk specifically about how you all have worked in the past with campus partners and how this initiative specifically is working to kind of enhance those relationships.
Yeah, so I started at the University of Rochester about 2.5 years ago, and I came from a business background working in small to medium-sized businesses. So what was interesting to me is coming into such a large organization is how there were a lot of silos, and part of the job that I signed up to do was to break one of those at the institution. So I work for the research division, and we're running a center that offers technology to all the biomedical researchers that we have, which is about 3,000. And what was shocking to me when I arrived was that not everybody even knew that the center existed. So they didn't know about all of the technologies they had access to. So that was part of the challenge on the table, was to help bridge that gap. So not only are we going after external business, but we also have to go after the internal business that we could have, because some of that business was leaving the institution. But just the way my role was structured, I was partway between the marketing team, and the department actually funds me and hired me directly. So I was bridging that gap. And then when I started school, I was on the other side of the institution too as a student. So I found myself in the middle of like 4 different mini organizations within the larger organization. And that was really eye-opening. So you're hearing conversations on one end of it, but not the other. Knowledge sharing back and forth, I realized how important that was very quickly. And spreading the word about the department I worked for, that was something that was apparent to me, like that needed to be done ASAP. And then when Brian and I started working together, I was meeting all these other marketers through him, the marketers on the university side, not on the medical side. And the committee that was structured and put together, I was getting to meet all of those people. And those are from a diverse set of areas within the institution too, from our music school to the Riverside campus to the medical center. So it was nice to sort of see everything come together, because we have about 300 marketing people within the institution, but at any one point in time, you're only interacting with maybe 50 of them. So the others you may not know unless you reach out and try to get to know them. So the committee has been great for that.
That's great. And at a large institution like that, I'm just so excited to hear you all using AI not only to enhance what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but to build collaboration and break silos. I think a lot of times we think of AI as a tool and a content creation tool that we can use to make our lives easier, but really it is a way to collaborate with others, because we're all really just exploring and trying to figure it out together. And so there's no better way to do that than with colleagues. So this is great. So Megan, I'll stick with you first here for this next one. And tell us about the kind of the one of the goals of this council is to integrate AI into your Marcom workflows. So why is that important, and how are you all working to make sure those integrations are safe and ethical and kind of up to standards?
Yeah, I think for me, it's an urgency to not see anybody left behind. So that was something when we started talking about AI on the medical center side, we were talking about guardrails, and we weren't necessarily talking about potential or training or education. And I was hearing all this stuff from the business school about how powerful of a tool AI was and how much we could expect it to be involved in the future of almost every business. And so when those conversations started happening, I really wanted to get everyone that I had in my sphere of influence over on the medical center just up to speed as much as possible. Like, at least let me tell you what is happening in the business school conversations. At least let's get to that point where we can have that dialogue, because I was seeing a lot of promise on that side. And so that's how I started talking to the medical side about it. But then, there's conversations happening over on the university side too. So I think because I was bringing it up, I just became sort of like the AI nerd on my team. And when Brian was looking for someone to connect with over on the medical center side, I think I was just the name that came to mind. But, for the safe and ethical adoption of everything, I think it's really about education, because you don't know what could happen to data. We all work with such sensitive data. So we're working with patient data, protected health information. We're subject to all the guidelines of HIPAA. And so I think there's a real danger in having data leaked into, the universe through these AI tools, and not talking about it doesn't help. I think, safe and ethical needs to start with telling people what could potentially happen and making sure they're using the tools in a responsible way. So it's getting them excited about the potential of AI, but also, I think along with that, just saying, hey, this is new technology. We don't exactly know what's happening to our inputs. So let's be aware of that. Like, let's use it as a tool, but also recognize its power. And that education just needs to be really comprehensive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an interesting wrinkle for that most people probably won't have to encounter that are listening to this, that HIPAA piece of things from the medical center side, and ensuring that, security and privacy. And Brian, from your perspective in the central Marcom area, how are you all, are you building any materials or guides for folks around campus to kind of accomplish what Megan was just talking about? And, as far as letting people know that, there are risks of, there are things that AI can be used for that, so we see reports of these all over the internet, but how are you kind of informing and educating campus partners about safety and privacy and things like that?
Yeah, that's a critical question. And one of the first things that we addressed as a committee, one of our first charges was to come up with institutional guidelines for Marcom generative AI usage across every landscape. So we went out and researched what other institutions were doing and what other brands were doing and what sorts of guidelines and policies they had set up. And then we came up with our own, list of that. So within the first 3 months that the committee was formed, we had submitted, our recommended guidelines to the institution, which have since been adopted, and we're getting ready to post those up on our website. We also came up with a short-term and long-term roadmap for AI integration within Marcom across the institution. And then we did a report on, the state of Marcom AI, generative AI usage. Megan's team led a survey to the 300 different Marcom staff about that to see, how they were currently using it. And we found out that about 20% of the Marcom people were already using it like weekly with no guidelines, with no training. And then the last part of our first 3 months was coming up with kind of an awareness and training program. So we're starting to roll that out now. We're hijacking other people's meetings and coming in and just showcasing some of the ways we're using this technology to make our processes more efficient and effective. And then part of that is also, preparing training on, the first 2 training modules we've created are on risks of using these tools so that everyone is aware of what they should and shouldn't be doing with these tools. That's everything from security to data privacy to, transparency and bias. And then also the other one we just finished was prompting, so that everyone knows kind of the best ways to put good inputs into the tools so you get good outputs from them.
Yeah, and I'm curious, what has been the general feedback from those discussions? You mentioned hijacking meetings, and I think that's something all marketers are used to in terms of socializing these ideas. But what has been the general feedback? Because I know across campuses everywhere, there are different levels of, readiness to jump into this AI pool, so to speak.
Yeah, and for the most part, we've found that everyone has played around with these tools, and a lot of the feedback that we initially got was, I tried putting a prompt in ChatGPT, and it really wasn't a very good output. So when we show some of the ways that we're using these tools and some of the input that we provide to the tools and the kind of output we're getting that is incredibly helpful and useful, people are very surprised to see that, oh, well, I just see with the right data up front and the right context around what you're trying to get, these tools can be really powerful and provide a lot of benefit.
Yeah. And so, Brian, you're mentioning the idea of kind of showing people the possibilities of these tools. And I'm remembering back to the Engage Summit a couple weeks ago in Raleigh when you showed the crowd a video of you translated into multiple languages and people's heads were exploding at the table. So, it really, I think seeing those possibilities, if you're kind of a novice to these tools, can really open up your thinking in terms of the possibilities that you might have. And so part of that, breaking down that sort of stigma or taboo, so to speak, for some around campus is buy-in from leadership. So tell us about the executive sponsors of this council and why it's so important for them to be on board from a kind of a cabinet level standpoint.
Hey there, it's Mallory, Chief Strategist of Enrollify. Higher ed is facing a leadership crisis. The demands on today's college and university leaders are skyrocketing, and talent is leaving the industry at an unprecedented rate. New leaders like you are emerging, but no one is getting the proper training to be successful. Well, Enrollify is here to change that. Our new course, Lessons in Leadership, taught by Dr. Carrie Phillips, will prepare you to be a confident, empathetic, and effective leader. From systems thinking to adaptive leadership, building culture to handling difficult decisions, this comprehensive online course is perfect for new and aspiring leaders. Don't wait. The course starts September 9th, and for a lucky group of 26 students, we have the option to add interactive sessions with Dr. Phillips for personalized guidance. Visit enrollify.org to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, so the first presentation that I gave was to our vice president of marketing and communications. And she was very open to the idea, but she didn't really have a solid understanding of what the capabilities of these tools were. So, I went through showcasing some of those different features. And then also, I think that the key element for leadership is also showing what our peers are doing, what other institutions are doing, and how they're scaling up and starting to leverage these technologies. And then understanding the risks of not implementing these technologies, because all the students that we're educating are going to need some capability of using these tools when they go out into the real world. It's just going to get, embedded into every job that we do, every activity that we have. There's going to be AI in the background running and helping us and assisting us. So, I think it's critical for institutions to really start thinking about how they're going to integrate these into their programs, how it's going to be embedded in the teaching and the learning and all the administrative tasks. And I always tell people, these tools are the worst AI tools we're ever going to use. And we're just barely scratching the surface of how we can use them. And by, sharing ideas and collaborating and communicating with each other it's the only way that we're going to get the most out of these tools. So,
Yeah, that's great advice, especially for, more junior marketers that are trying to implement these tools and having to have those conversations with leadership. So I appreciate that. And Megan, same question for you from the medical center side of things. Talk about buy-in from leadership on your side of the house and why that's been important.
I think that's important, especially when we talk about a figure, like Brian mentioned, from the survey, we learned that 20% of people were already using the tool. So I think the worst thing that could happen is for that to be going on behind the scenes and for people to feel like they can't be forthright about their use of the tool. Maybe they're finding it incredibly useful, but they just don't feel like they can talk about it. So destigmatizing that experience and making it more public allows for a big conversation around AI so we can share the different things that we're doing with each other. And I think that's critical at this juncture because AI is so new. We don't really know what it can do. I mean, we're figuring it out as we go and everyone's doing that. But within the institution, if we're not sharing our use cases with each other and our experiences, you're just doing it by yourself and you're not going to go down all those paths. You're not going to think of everything. There's so much I've learned from the other committee members, Brian included. And it's like a wow moment, like you see something that you could do that could make these repetitive tasks so much easier, or these remedial tasks. We all have that as part of our job. But here we can free ourselves up to do higher level thinking. We can ideate a little bit better. A lot of us work from home. So this can function as like bouncing an idea off a colleague sometimes. So it's pretty powerful. And I think having leadership and these stakeholders involved just makes the information flow more easily. And I think that we uncovered a fear too with the survey about how people have an anxiety that this might be coming for their job. And to have leadership say, this is not our goal. We're raising the profile of AI just to help you do your job. And it's not about, trying to replace you. We're just trying to stay competitive and maintain our competitive advantage and make sure that, everyone has access to something that could really help their productivity and output. So having that come from somebody at the top is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's so important because you hear it a lot. It's going to take my job. And it's really important for leadership to say, no, we're trying to free up your time so that you can be more effective in your job and be more strategic and in a lot of cases do better work because you've got this resource that we're putting time into. And you mentioned the kind of bouncing ideas off of one another every time I go to a conference. And I think I feel like I'm in a good space in AI. I see somebody like Brian or artists present, and I'm like, okay, I'm way behind. So it's it is really helpful to learn from peers in that way.
I was just going to say, to build off of that, I mean, one of the things we keep discovering as we're connecting other people from these other domains is that by having these conversations, we're preventing this duplication of work, because people are doing very similar things in very different sides of the institution, and we can leverage all of that knowledge. And in this technology where it's moving so quickly and developing so fast, it's more than any one person can keep up with. So you really need this community. You need this network of people all kind of understanding, what's the technical, the back end side of things, what's the data security side of things, what are the application and usage. So critical to keep these conversations going, especially for AI.
Yeah, and just kind of people understanding that, oh, Brian and Megan are doing this with AI. I didn't even think of that, but that's really useful for my role. And so, yeah, I think that collaboration is so important. I want to kind of dig into the process of the stakeholder group and where you all are currently at. Brian, in our pre-interview, you mentioned that the guidelines and things have been approved. So that's great progress. And you mentioned testing out specific tools in this next phase. So talk about some of the tools that you're testing and using and how you plan on exploring those.
Yeah, so one of the first things we did is we got a budget approved for tool testing. So the university IT is still figuring out the best way to get the broader community access to these tools. So we're just digging in. We currently have access to ChatGPT Teams, Claude Teams, Gemini Pro, and Copilot. So within our committee, we're testing out all of those tools. We have about 60 different use cases that we've come up with. So we've assigned different people to test different use cases and kind of report on their findings, which tools seem to do the best for those, what their experiences were, so that we're kind of build that into all of our training and education. But then we're also finding, we still have some budget left over. So we're also finding people like on the social team who came to us and said, we really want to try out this other tool that isn't in our list, but we think it can save us a lot of time. So we're open to, exploring and experimenting and testing out all the different efficiencies that we might gain from these tools, and then documenting all of that so that by the time the university is ready to start looking at, a wider adoption, we're going to have the training, the testing. We're already going to have started the awareness process across the campus. We're going to have an understanding of which tools are the best for which applications.
And it is the ultimate goal to kind of narrow down the tools that you all want to use, or is this more of here are the tools that are effective for the university and it's a multitude of them?
Yeah, I think ideally it's going to be a multitude of tools. I mean, we're seeing, this technology being more and more integrated into all the tools that we're currently using, and we haven't even really started exploring all of those opportunities yet. So right now we're really looking at external tools and testing those out. And these models are changing so quickly that, one tool may be great one week, but then the next week a different tool is going to be better. So, we're keeping running these tests, returning back to, previous prompts and previous use cases that we've had, testing them again. And this is just going to be kind of an ongoing exploration and learning opportunity for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one thing that's jumping to my mind as we're talking about different tools is that there's a 99.9% chance everybody listening to this has used AI in one form or another. If you've ever asked Alexa to do something for you, you're an AI user. So, I think it's interesting because students coming into our institutions are, not necessarily growing up with this technology, but they are in its coming of age period, and they are going to be using it. And so, Megan, you have an interesting perspective on this because you're currently a student at University of Rochester. So tell us about how that experience has sort of influenced your perspective, not only on AI and collaboration, but your contributions to this council as well from that student standpoint.
Yeah, I think I was fully expecting, for a professor to take the view of don't go there with AI. Maybe that's just giving you too much of an advantage or, borderline cheating. Like I felt like that might be their approach. But I think Simon in particular, Simon Business School, which is part of the U of R, they are very progressive in their views of AI. So they're developing out a whole program dedicated to AI. And they were early adopters. So that was helpful. So in the classroom, when you have a professor say, hey, here's a cool application for this technology, and start showing you use cases in the classroom, that really encourages you to keep going with the tool. So initially I was using it just more to help explain something, like a tutor kind of. If you miss something in a lecture, just go to ChatGPT and ask it to explain price elasticity of demand. What's that formula again? It's helpful in that way. But to see it go beyond that into business use cases and into, how we've seen the history of machine learning really impact businesses up to this certain point in time, and how we can expect AI to continue to change the landscape of businesses going forward in terms of automation, in terms of intelligence, in terms of personalization. So getting that education from them and having them destigmatize it in a lot of ways really made it easy for me to feel like I could talk about it in the workplace. So I was using the tool, and then I was able to have those conversations with those around me from another perspective that was more organizational almost. So it's like, here's how this could be structured, instead of just, oh, here's a cool thing, also important. Here's a cool use case, but really the broader implications of having AI adoption in the workplace. And I see it from different angles too, outside of the business school. And like Brian was mentioning, there's people in different divisions of the institution working with AI technology. So you see those applications play out as well. For example, like in a clinical application, perhaps it's being used to take notes of a patient visit. That's far more accurate than what was happening before, where someone was trying to scribble down notes as fast as you could talk. So you're seeing these different advantages for different departments. And I think that broadens the conversation and allows us to think in such a way where it's not just about us using the tools, but it's about how that connects with everybody else's use of the tools.
Yeah.
So that's an important organizational wide conversation, I think.
Yeah, it's great perspective. It's reminding me, not quite the same thing, but I'll never forget this when I was at grad school going on 10 years ago. I feel old now. We had a finance course and we were taking an exam where we had to memorize all these different accounting equations. And I had to convince our professor to say, can we at least write these down on these? If I'm working for an organization and I'm trying to run numbers or tabulate the books, I'm not just going to guess the formula if I don't know it. It really reminds me of a tool like as simple as that, to say, this is a support to make sure that we're doing things accurately and correct. And it's another touch point for us to kind of check our work. And that it's not an apples for apples example, but I'll never forget that. He allowed us to have the formulas there, because really in real life, you're not just guessing. You're going to double and triple check. And I think AI is a great tool for that.
I just was thinking it may push education to change in such a way where it's not about what you can memorize. That's not the most important thing you could learn. It's about how you could creatively think or push the technology. So it's just a different approach. I mean, the idea that you have to have all this stuff, facts and figures in your head at all times, I don't know if that's part of our reality anymore. There's better ways to use our abilities.
Yeah, I think for a long time as students, test taking is how much can you memorize? And I think a tool like this lets us get beyond that. It's a great point. So closing out here, Megan, I'll start with you. I want to talk about some of the objectives going forward for this stakeholder group, and just get your thoughts from both of you, from how you see this initiative impacting the university's future.
Yeah, I think for me, it's such an issue of competitive advantage. And I think that's one thing that Brian and I have spent time talking about is, that benchmarking process of how is everyone else using it and how should we be using it? What are the different things we can do with it? So that's one of the key things I think with moving forward and having, that objective in front of us all the time. I mean, it's making sure nobody gets left behind, but it's also maintaining our market position and increasing our market position. I think when a new technology breaks onto the scene, you have that opportunity to be an early adopter and to start leading. And, here it is, we could take advantage of it. So for me, that's something I think a lot about. In terms of impacting the university's future, I probably take a slightly different view being on the medical side. I get really excited about how it impacts healthcare, just because I think that's impacting the consumer. Like in the marketing group, it's definitely going to impact our workflows, our creativity, and our output. I think with healthcare, it's going to end up touching the consumer. So that's something we can be excited about, all of us, because it's going to speed our advancement in terms of disease investigation. So we'll be able to find cures faster. That's an application that I think is really exciting. As far as a clinical, I mean, we can look at biomarkers earlier than we could before. We could build a human model of you and say, okay, here's a change we're detecting. And AI can help us detect that change, and we can get in front of that. And so you don't have to wait until you're experiencing 100 symptoms to get a treatment. So I think that's something that's unique to healthcare, obviously, and biomedical research. But I think the future is really bright there.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, the number of I think industries and sectors and humans that this technology can impact and touch. And Brian, from your standpoint, certainly content strategy speaking in terms of impact on the university's future, but I think in general, interested to hear your thoughts on how this council can sort of lead the university forward.
Yeah, I mean, one of our long-term roadmap goals is to help our community. So everything that we learn, all the knowledge that we gain about how to integrate these systems into marketing, into business, these are all things that we want to then take out to our community and, act as, free consultants to local businesses to show them how to, more effectively integrate these tools into their workflows and save them time. I mean, we have people like on the medical center, they're mapping the human genome using some of this technology, which is fascinating. But, on the business side in our community, we can do so much to help our local area by educating them about how to get rid of all the monotonous work that they do and the things that they aren't the best at, that they can use these tools to, act as personal tutors, personal assistants. And we're going to see this, even more than just in business, in our personal lives. We're going to start, I already have tools that help me with my meal planning and my fitness planning. And, we're going to get more and more of those just integrated into all of our lives, all of our activities. And I think being a resource for our community is one of the best things that we can do as an institution.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you all are doing, I think, as far as I've seen from colleagues around the industry, I think you were sort of on that leading edge of best practice in terms of implementing this technology across campus. So I appreciate your insights, and I hope the listeners do as well, because it's really the right way to go about this type of work. So thank you both for your time and your insights on this episode.
Well, thanks so much for having us. And I always tell everybody we are willing to share, any of our insights or research or any of the building blocks that we use to get this committee started, because we think the more institutions that can do this and the more we can collaborate as an industry, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, and for the folks listening, in the episode notes, you'll be able to find Brian and Megan on LinkedIn. Would encourage you to reach out to both of them for their insights on this process if it's something you're thinking about at your institution. So Brian and Megan, thank you both so much again.
Thank you for having us.
Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your hosts. Learn from Dave Builds, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and many more of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.